we are going to be getting into Nehemiah. Nehemiah. That's close. Nehemiah, we're going to be in chapter 5. And there's a couple of key points that I want to hit. I do want us to go through, we're going to read through most of Nehemiah within the next few weeks. There's a few parts that we'll skip, and the way that I'm approaching it is there's not just one big theme. There's actually quite a few themes that come out. But I do think what we've talked about the last couple of weeks is Nehemiah realized, and he knew this, but there are enemies of the things of God, right? And we've talked a lot about those ideologies. One thing that we will do here at Journey on a regular basis is identifying those ideologies in the culture around us, because I think we're entering a time where there's going to be lots of confusion. There's going to be lots of competing voices to get you on their side. And it's going to be a challenge. And for example, I will use last night as an example, and some things that I am very concerned with. One, we should all be concerned when any military action is taken, correct? Right? None of us should be cheering this, right? There are some that get to the point, oh, yes, this is a great thing. Well, I understand why it needed to be done, and I tend to agree that it needed to be done. However, we need to be real careful just casually celebrating things like that. Another thing that is, it should be a little terrifying to us, the power of our military. It's really impressive, but that's scary, right? I mean, and we're still just learning, but what we were able to do with basically not even being detected is quite incredible. And I know, from the sage wisdom movie of The Amazing Spider-Man, with much power comes much responsibility, right? There is truth there, right? And so there's all kinds of reactions to what's going on, and people are saying, oh, and people will immediately get into their camps. Some just for political purposes because they don't like who's in charge, just come up. There's a lot going on here. One of the things that is one of the more concerning things that I am seeing, that if you're only watching kind of your mainstream media, is there is a growing isolationist movement within conservative circles and Christian circles. I saw lots of, they call them influencers, right? I am not one. But there are people that they do influence a lot of people. And here's some near quotes. One was, well, at least it's good to know that we are now just completely do whatever Israel wants us to do. There are those, and these are people who were strong Trump supporters. Many proclaim Christ, strong. I've seen lots of things where they talk about believing in who Christ is. They would post things like Christ is King and all of this stuff. And all of a sudden now, because of what just happened, it's like, oh, the Jews did this. These are quotes that I'm seeing from people who have thousands, if not millions of followers on social media. There were many of the little things that I was reading that was very disturbing. And so I, of course, did what any normal person would do. I Googled Hitler's views of Jewish influence. And in his first letter back in 1916, he was talking about how the Jews had gained undue influence over the government of Germany. and that the German government was now under the influence of the Jews. And then I go to my Twitter feed in 2025 and see, it's good to see, or it's good to know now that our American government is under control of the Jewish people. I'm like, these are dangerous correlations, right? Now, why do I bring this up? I'm going to wrap this up, but it kind of goes into what we're talking about too. It is very important that we do pay attention. There's also starting to be a rise from kind of that group of anyone that believes in a view of Revelation that may be called dispensationalism, different things, that the only reason we're supporting Israel is because you have that view of the book of Revelation. Well, there's lots of reasons to support Israel in that country that have nothing to do with biblical reasons, right? There are going to be lots of competing voices that are going to try to claim biblical basis, and it's going to be used to divide us. We need to be very careful. And I just want to be very clear, anti-Semitism is real. And I don't think that we should support the Jews just because there's a verse in the Old Testament that says those who support Israel are blessed and those who don't are cursed. It's not that simple, right? The nation of Israel is not all that godly right now. That is true. But that doesn't mean that we don't recognize different ideologies at play here. And the Iranian ideology, we've mentioned it a little bit. It is extremely dangerous. It is an extremely dangerous ideology of Islam within Islam, right? Their ideology is to destroy a whole nation of people, right? And it puts you, whenever you have a country that has power and influence, then it puts you in a spot to where you have to try to navigate those waters. And it is so naive just to say, oh, well, we just stay out of everything. Okay, their ideology is going to force you to get involved. Same way as that LGBT flag is not going to be satisfied with you just saying, hey, everybody just go their own way. No, it's going to try to force you to comply, right? That's the nature of enemies. That's the nature of these ideologies. It's what we were talking about in Nehemiah. That's what he was battling, is that ideology. We're still seeing it today. And I do believe that eventually it's going to culminate with the return of Christ. I mean, that's the road we're on. And so I just encourage you, be careful. If you have friends who are going down some dangerous roads of starting to hate all Jews, try to stop them, in compassionate ways. But that is a danger that I am seeing, and so please be in prayer about that. And again, as I've said before, be praying for our leaders. Man, I can't even imagine the decisions that they're having to make. Wow. So Nehemiah, this is very interesting. So we're getting to chapter 5. I still have not got my Bible that has the big letters back yet. So it's still the same words, though. But Nehemiah chapter 5. Remember now, Nehemiah is full force in the rebuilding. All of chapter 4, he was dealing with enemies. And so what did he do? He gave everybody a sword. He put guards on there. He rallied people together. They were getting frustrated. They're like, oh, this is going to be too difficult. How are we going to handle this? He said, no, we are going to do this. We are going to get this wall rebuilt. And those were, I would consider, outside enemies, right? And so I connected that with what are the outside enemies today. And so specifically the ideology of kind of that Marxist critical theory that is from the outside, but it is trying to get inside, right? And sadly, it has in many ways. The other ideology that we talked a lot about last week kind of went through a history of Islam and how it has been historically opposed to the people of God. Before there was a nation of Israel, there were Muslim communities killing Christians. It's not because we support Israel that Iran hates us. But it's just not, right? There's deep ideologies here. So we talked about those ideologies. Nehemiah knew, hey, I've got to continue rebuilding this wall and deal with the enemies. So we do both. Well, so things continue on. Now, Nehemiah chapter 5. Now, there arose a great outcry of the people and their wives against the Jewish brothers. For there were those who said, with our sons and our daughters, we are many, so let us get grain, so that we may eat and keep alive. There were also those who said, we are mortgaging our fields and our vineyards and our houses to get grain because of the famine. And there were those who said, we have borrowed money for the king's tax on our fields and on our vineyards. Now our flesh is as the flesh of our brothers, our children are as their children. Yet we are forcing our sons and our daughters to be slaves, and some of our daughters have already been enslaved. But it is not in our power to help it, for other men have our fields and our vineyards. I was very angry when I heard their outcry and these words. I took counsel with myself, and I brought charges against the nobles and the officials. I said to them, you are exacting interest, each from his brother. And I held a great assembly against them and said to them, we are, as far as we are able, have bought back our Jewish brothers who have been sold to the nations. But you even sell your brothers that they may be sold to us. They were silent and could not find a word to say. So I said, the thing that you are doing is not good. Ought you not to walk in the fear of our God to prevent the taunts of the nations of our enemies? Moreover, I and my brothers and my servants are lending them money and grain. Let us abandon this exacting of interest. Return to them this very day their fields, their vineyards, their olive orchards, and their houses, and the percentage of money, grain, wine, and oil that you have been exacting from them. Then they said, we will restore these things and require nothing from them. We will do as you say. And I called the priests and made them swear to do as they promised. I also shook out the fold of my garment and said, so may God shake out every man from his house and from his labor who does not keep his promise. So may he be shaken out and emptied. And all the assembly said, amen, and praised the Lord. And the people did as they had promised. Moreover, from the time I was appointed to be their governor in the land of Judah, from the 20th year to the 32nd year of Artaxerxes the king, 12 years, neither I nor my brothers ate the food allowance of the governor. The former governors who were before me laid heavy burdens on the people, took from them their daily rations of 40 shekels of silver. Even the servants lorded it over the people. But I did not do so because of fear of the Lord. I also persevered in the work on this wall, and we acquired no land, and all my servants were gathered there for the work. Moreover, there were at my table 150 men, Jews and officials, besides those who came to us from the nations that were around us. Now what was prepared at my expense for each day was 1 ox and 6 choice sheep and birds, and every 10 days all kinds of wine in abundance. Yet for all this I did not demand the food allowance of the governor, because the service was too heavy on this people. Remember for my good, O my God, all that I have done for this people. All right. Now, there's a lot going on here, and a couple of points I want to draw out. So what's happening? So the building process is going, right? And remember, this isn't all happening like in a month span. This is taking time. Nehemiah is, as he said, ended up being governor there for 12 years. So this is over this period of time. It started off with these outside forces who were the enemies, who were pushing back, and Nehemiah was having to deal with those enemies. But guess what? There can be enemies within as well. And so you see this conflict that rises up among the people themselves. And basically what it has been is that it's shocking. You know, we hear things today like, tax the rich. We look at things as the haves and the have-nots, and the people who have all it and all the money, and those who don't, and we get mad about all of that, and we think that, oh, if we just did a different system, it'd be so much better. No, it wouldn't be better, right? Because we are a fallen people. And people, especially whenever you have moved away from the fear of the Lord, whatever your system is going to become more oppressive. Doesn't matter what that system is, right? And what we see here is basically you have Persia, ironically, it's Iran, Persia that is controlling the people group of Israel at this time, right? So they have taxes and things that are there. They actually used a lot of local labor, if you will, right? And so they empowered people like a Nehemiah. But then they had empowered also people who were from that group to kind of be responsible for collecting the taxes, sending the tribute, if you will, back to Persia. But then what would happen is then you would have local government as well that would also have taxes on people and collect. And what was happening is this was brother against brother, as it says. So you had Jews who had positions of authority that, under Persia, but then they also were like, well, you know what? I need my cut. And so they were taxing the people even more, and it was forcing the people to have to get to the point where they're nearly having to sell their sons and daughters into slavery. Well, what does that mean? It's indentured servanthood is the main type of slavery that was going on back then, right? And so it's a horrible situation. And the people are like, hey, we can't keep building the wall and doing all these other things. It's just getting too much. And I thought it was interesting when Nehemiah, he talks to them, and you can tell he gets very upset about this. And he says, I took counsel within myself. I think there's a good lesson there. He kind of steps back, takes a breath, and goes, okay, I need to figure out how I'm going to handle this, because rather than just going off the handle, right? So he says, why are you doing this? You wouldn't be treating your fellow brother like this if you had a fear of the Lord, right? So these are spiritual issues that we're seeing, right? And so Nehemiah is working on rebuilding the walls. The temple has been rebuilt, but the people have not fully moved back to where they need to be spiritually. And the further you are away from God, the further your society is going to be away from God, and that is going to lead to even more of taking advantage of other people, because that's the nature of sin. The nature of sin is that we decide that we are God and He is not, and we elevate ourselves above everything else. So what happens whenever you start elevating yourself and that you are the most important? Well, you're going to easily justify, oh, you know what? I'm going to charge that landowner, a little bit extra, and I'm going to take off the top before I send it to Persia, right? Because you're just out for your own. You don't have a fear of the Lord. You are the Lord in your life, so therefore everything can be justified, right? And so you have to. So the further we get away from fearing the Lord as a people, the more destruction to people is going to happen. That's the ideology that we've talked about of Marxism, communism. One of the reasons that it has led to millions and millions and millions and millions of people dead. By the way, just within the last 100 years, millions of people have died because of that ideology. Is it because they just don't know how to do it right? That they've just never had the right governor in place? Man, if they would have just put a different person than Stalin in place. No, it's because the ideology intentionally divorces itself from the reality of God. There is no fear of the Lord, right? And that always leads to death and destruction, right? Our system is not perfect by any means. right? Our system throughout history has elevated more people out of poverty than any other system has ever done. People are better taken care of in our system than any other system that has ever existed. However, we are now starting to go the other direction. Why is that? Because it's not the system necessarily, it's because we have lost the fear of the Lord, right? And it's vital for us to understand how that does impact our society. And so what Nehemiah has run into now, and this was so frustrating for him. He's like, man, I'm dealing with these guys that want to kill us, right? That just want to see us dead. And then we can't even get along ourselves, right? It's like we can't just be supportive of each other. Don't we realize we have the same values, we have the same overall goals, and we want this to be a success, and here we are still taking advantage of each other. I think there's an important lesson here. Is life is never going to be easy. Things are never going to go the way that you would hope them to go. Sometimes we lull ourselves into the belief or the hope that, man, if we're faithful enough, if we're truly following God's will for our life, that those obstacles are just going to melt away because we're doing the Lord's work, right? Nehemiah is doing the Lord's work, and look at the chaos that he's having to deal with. I think we all know this inherently, right? That it doesn't matter what situation you're in, there's going to be difficulty. But we try to convince ourselves that we can create the perfect situation where that won't happen. And I've talked to so many people, I think it's important for us to realize that within your own family, guess what? It's very normal to have a lot of strife sometimes. It doesn't mean that you're not following God. It can, right? That raises the opportunity for it. But those that are closest to us, we live in a fallen world. They may still be the ones to hurt us. I see this within churches a lot. We kind of get this idea that, within the church, we're all Christians. We all love each other, right? So it's going to be a perfect melding of personalities, and there's never going to be any problems. Huh. Goodness gracious, it's crazy, right? And and it's tough because when it happens, it's easier for us to recognize the enemy's outside the gates, right? And it's easier for us to kind of rally together against them. It's more personal when it's inside, when it's within your family, when it's within your friend group, when it's within your church. I can remember whenever we were at our previous church before moving here back in West Texas, and it was, there was a part, it was just getting ridiculous. And I could go down lots of details here, but I do remember, it was funny. Y'all know recently Phil Robertson, who was the Duck Dynasty guy, passed away. And it was interesting. It kind of hit me. I was like, that was sad. I don't know this guy. I've never gone duck hunting in my life. I've never bought a duck call. I don't even know what a duck call is, right? But I started thinking about it. The reason why is because it was during this time at the church, and it was so frustrating because there were so many attacks that were just ridiculous and so superficial, but they were real. Every meeting, and oh my, in a church that has a committee on committees, you have a lot of meetings, right? And I was at every one of them, and all of them, it was fire over here, fire over there, shield over here, cloak of invisibility over here. Like it's a battle in every one of them, right? And I can remember, and I think we would record it because it was on Wednesday nights, but we would watch Duck Dynasty and just laugh. And it was just a release because it was funny, it was stupid, but they were wholesome. They actually prayed, right? And it was just at one of those times that was our sanity, right? Because there was nothing else funny going on, but that was our sanity. And I say that it hits differently when the attacks are coming from within, right? But guess what? We live in a fallen world. And so, yeah, even within the walls of the church, sin abounds, right? And Satan is going to be working doubly hard within those walls, right? To find any little opening that he can do to cause you to be frustrated. And one of the big points as I was reading through, I want you to know that God has called you to go and to share a life-changing message of salvation with people in your circles. And when you do that, it's going to get hard, right? Like Satan is going to push back against it. Don't be surprised by that. And don't chalk that up to, well, maybe I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. Maybe because God is clearly not blessing this, because if God was going to bless this, it would just make everything easier. No, that's not how it is all the time. So understand there are enemies within the gates and we have to deal with them. Nehemiah had to deal with them. And how did he deal with them? He called them back to what? A fear of the Lord. And he said, I'm the governor. You better get this straightened out. And I love the passage that I've never worn a robe, but how awesome would it be to shake that robe as a sign of you do what I say, right? He was that was kind of it was a cultural thing, but that's what he was doing whenever he shook out his robe and he's like shaking out the sinfulness that they had been doing and says, we're moving forward now, right? And we're moving forward in the fear of the Lord. And then one thing, too, that I think goes along with this, when you actually start to live your life for Christ. So in a way, in a similar way that Nehemiah began this new chapter in his life by rebuilding this wall to help the people, because he knew that's what God was calling him to do. When you step out and you start living your life for Christ, one, it's going to be challenging. And two, you need to know why you're doing it. Are you doing it for your own gratification? Are you doing it to be recognized by the world? Because you can do some good things in that, but ultimately you're going to crumble and the message of Christ will be damaged. One thing that Nehemiah says is he says, as the governor, he never took all that he was allotted, because he was allotted way more than the people. And you see what he's wrestling with. It doesn't mean there was anything wrong with him taking that. If he would have taken it, that wouldn't have been ungodly. However, Nehemiah wasn't going on this journey and changing his life so that he could be rewarded with worldly things. And I think he was very careful not to get caught up into going about doing this job that God had called him to do so that he could receive earthly riches. He was doing it because he knew that was the right thing to do. And we need to constantly be evaluating our motivations for why we do things as well. Right? We are seeing now a lot, especially with social media. There are a lot of pastoral voices. There are a lot of Christian influencers. And we will never know all of their motivations. But we live in a world where you can monetize and you can take advantage of anything if you're a good enough marketer. We need to be very careful with that. That we follow what God is putting on your heart, because we are wanting to bring honor to him. And we are storing up treasures in heaven because we are being faithful to what he has called us to do, whether it benefits us or not. Right? I think that is so important, because if the reason that you're going to start living your life for Christ is for the benefits that it's going to bring you, what happens when those benefits don't come in the way that you want them to? Do you just say, well, I guess I'm writing God off now? No, the reason that we should follow what God is calling us to do is because he's called us to do it. And he has redeemed you. And he wants others to be drawn into his presence as well. And he's called you to do that. I encourage us as we continue going through Nehemiah, recognizing that life is messy. And man, there are challenges and enemies on the outside, enemies on the inside. There are going to be temptations for you to do things for your own benefit. But when it comes down to it, what's that last verse in chapter 5? Nehemiah, he says this. He says, remember for my good, O my God, all that I have done for this people. He is actually calling and praying to God to look at my heart, for God to be the judge of his actions, of his motivations, and that what he wants to do is he just wants to serve the people that God has called him to serve. And when it comes down to it, that should be our prayer for our life. We should ask God to constantly be guarding our hearts from the enemies without and the enemies within, guarding our hearts from false motives that take us down selfish paths rather than the path that leads to eternal life. We need to be about sharing the message of Jesus Christ, not because of what it brings us, but because of what we have found in him, and that we desire for others to find the same thing. That's it. And he has called you, just as he called Nehemiah to go and build that wall. He has called you to go out into a broken culture and to share the message of the life-changing redemption that we find in Jesus Christ. But go into it with your eyes open. You're going to find new enemies. You're going to find new challenges. But God, if he's calling you, he will equip you. And I know that he has called each one of you and given each of you unique opportunities to share the message of Christ with people that God has put in your path. Make sure you're looking each and every day. Where's God calling you to share his message with your family, your coworkers, with your friends? Let's take that message into the world, because the world desperately needs it.